Hello everybody, Sam Tom here. Not sure what I'm going to call this video yet because I want to make a play on the fact that Kang and Lang both rhyme, but I don't think that's going to come through very well in a video title. But basically what I'm doing here is I have watched these 4 movies as well as the segments from the final episode of Loki with Kang in it to get an idea of what has come to prepare for what is coming next. So as of recording, I have not yet seen Quantumania. I'm going later today, so I'm going to try to get through this quickly because I have a showtime to meet. So I'm probably going to call this like tracking Lang and Kang through the MCU or something like that. So we start in Ant-Man 1. Within the first 5 minutes of the movie, we are informed that Scott Lang has a daughter, so that's very early on set up as his motivation for things. Do I want to get into other things about the movies, or do I just want... Because, like, Baskin Robbins, I'm just like, is that... Did they pay to be featured and advertised for in that movie? Or... did Marvel just use it and, like, Baskin Robbins didn't like it? Because it's, like, on one hand, you're in a Marvel movie, and, like, the owner, or not the owner, the manager is, like, a fan of Scott Lang. But on the other hand, it's like, but they fired the good guy, so that's not... I don't know how Baskin Robbins feels about that. We are told that the Ant-Man technology works by changing the distance between atoms while increasing density and strength. It's pretty well known that that's bullcrap, because you can't go subatomic if all you're doing is shrinking the spaces between atoms. And I feel like most people have just let that go. But my kind of headcanon, I guess, about it is that that's just a lie that Hank Pym tells people. Because he doesn't want other people to figure out how he does what he does. So why would he tell them the real method? That's just a lie that he says because most people don't think about it that much. So I think in universe, obviously it works a different way because that doesn't work. It doesn't increase density because the density is all over the place, right? Maybe it increases density as you get bigger because otherwise you would float away. Right? But when you get smaller, it doesn't increase density. And, like, it's very inconsistent because, you know, when he falls out of the bathtub, he cracks the tile, and then he falls through the floor, which is then the ceiling, but then he just lands on a record, and the record is fine. And it's like, he can pull a guy over by yanking on his tie because he's got the same strength and supposedly the same mass. But then, like, how can he walk on his gun? And, like, how can an assassin... hide in a briefcase? Wouldn't they notice that that briefcase weighs, 200 pounds extra? And, like, the tank that Hank Pym is carrying around on a keychain should weigh thousands. So, like, obviously the density is not consistent, right? And like I said, most people forgive it, but what I don't see many people talking about is that I think there is an actual method of how it works, and Hank Pym just hasn't told anybody. And he's lying. It's possible he might not even know what it is, right? But whatever he does know, he is intentionally saying falsehoods to other people so that no one else can figure it out. And that's why no one else has been able to figure it out. Even Cross, who eventually has his own version of it, it's not until he finds and steals the particle that he's able to do it successfully. Speaking of Cross, he mentions that he had a breakthrough in shrinking inorganic material. Why do we never see that in these movies, right? Other than, in the Ant-Man movies. But, like, why isn't that just a technology that's available to people? Why doesn't Stark have stuff like that? Why doesn't Justin Hammer have stuff like that, right? Like, you would think if that was a breakthrough that a company had, we'd see that somewhere, but it never comes up outside of these movies, specifically outside of the main characters doing it. Lang versus Stark. I remember when this movie was in production that people were worried that Scott Lang was going to be too much like Tony Stark, and like, okay, they're both Maybe it was more Hank Pym. Maybe it was before it was revealed that it was going to be Scott Lang. But like, they're both geniuses, and they both have technology suits, and they're so similar, and blah 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 blah. And how are you going to make them different? And I think it really works. What they did was that Stark is a jerk who just criticizes everybody, and Scott Lang is a nice person and like kind of a goofball and doesn't take himself too seriously, even though he's very smart. So I think that works really, really well. The bit where he's trying to figure out how long it's going to take him to see Cassie. He's doing the math and he writes down 377 days, which is a bit over a year. And like, I've never had kids and I've never been to prison. So like, I don't want to fault him too much for this, but like, you were just in jail for 3 years for what seems to be his first offense. I'm going to come back to that later. But it's like, you've been saying, I'm not going back to jail, I'm not going back to jail, I'm not going back to jail. But like, your math is telling you that if you do everything right, it will be a little over a year before you are legally allowed to see your daughter. But if you do another crime and get caught again, it's going to be much more than a year. And you got caught the first time, and now people are expecting you to do crime. Why would you do more crime? Like I said, don't have a kid, never been in jail. That just seems like not a smart decision, right? Because, if it had been like 7 years until he was going to be able to see Cassie, and he was thinking that, oh, if I go back to jail, it'll only be 3 or 5, something like that. If there was some kind of version where even if he had gotten caught and arrested, it would still be less time than his current situation. But his current situation was barely over a year. So I don't understand his decisions there. And then, as I brought up, I wrote down, did he burgle before the Vista job? Because we're never told that, like, he's got a history of burglary or a history of crime. It seems like that's his one and only job. But then later on, he's like, yeah, I'm a thief, and I'm a good thief. And it's like, you've done one thieving, and you got caught. How does he have all these burglar skills? Right? He says at one point that he's a cat burglar. Like, are you? Are there other crimes that you've done that we don't know about? Because it seems like you're not a burglar. You just tried burgling one time and got caught. It's very just hand waved away, I guess. And I've never thought about it before this rewatch. So like, I understand how I haven't seen other people bring this up because I've never noticed it before. And like, kind of along that same route is we never learn anything about his family. His wife and his ex-wife and his kid, obviously, but like his parents and his siblings, we don't learn anything about that. And like, I guess there are other characters that's true for. Like, we don't really know much about Captain America's parents, but we know that they both died when he was pretty young. Bruce Banner, we don't know a whole lot about his parents, but like, if you pick up on, because the 2003 film, it's not canon, but it's like, you can kind of get some ideas from there. Black Widow, that's kind of her whole deal, is that we don't know anything about her parents, but like, Thor, we know about his parents. Black Panther, we know about his parents. Spider-Man, we know about his parents and his aunt and his uncle. Iron Man, we know about his parents. Who else? I'm just looking up at my movies here. Peter Quill, we know about his parents. Gamora, we know kind of, about her parents. So like, other than like Groot and Rocket, there's not that many main characters. Shang-Chi, we know about his parents. There's not that many main characters that we just know nothing about their parents. I guess I don't remember if we know a whole lot about Captain Marvel. But even her, we get some flashbacks to when she's a kid. But I don't know if her parents are ever involved. Guess I'll have to rewatch that movie. But, it's a rarity that we have a main character and we know nothing about their parents, who they came from, how they were raised, what their upbringing was like. And so I'm just kind of like, what is there more there? Is there more of a history of crime there? I don't know. Okay. Then I wrote, when do the lasers stop? Because there are multiple scenes where Yellow Jacket is in the Yellow Jacket suit. By the way, I don't know if you can see all the figurines I got up here, but there's a big Yellow Jacket one right there. And they're in the briefcase, and the lasers are just like shooting out of the briefcase, and I'm just like, how far do those go? Is it a distance thing? Is it until they reach a certain amount of resistance, like a human body or something? Because if they just go on forever, like, how does that work? Does that mean that while they're falling, other people around are getting hit by lasers? Are buildings getting damaged? We don't really see that. Then I just wrote titanium. This has been talked about. The like titanium's not this magical substance. It's just another type of metal. There's no reason you should need to go subatomic to get through there. I'm going to just consider that an extension of the lie of how we don't know how it works, and titanium is just the kryptonite for some reason. And then the last note for the first one is, why do the train cars explode? I love the whole scene in the bedroom. I'm fine with the density not mattering, and it's just what happens because it looks cool, so I'm fine with the train bursting through the roof and suddenly being heavy, even though it's just a toy train. I'm fine with the ant growing big, but not floating off because it now just has more mass. I'm fine with all of that, but why do the train cars explode, right? Shouldn't the lasers just, like, melt them? And, like, I guess it looks cooler, but you can't do that and then also have the bit where the train just collapses and falls off the track because it's just a toy train. That's weird. That's silly. Also, not really relevant to anything, but I feel like most people don't know, or at least they don't talk about it, that, like, the director of this is the guy that directed Bring It On, which, like, yeah, I've got all the Bring It On movies. And I don't know. I just feel like at some point in some of these movies, during a showdown or a standoff or at the start of a fight, you could just have somebody say, "Bring it on," and then it's like, "Ha! That's the movie." Not a big deal though. Then we move to Captain America: Civil War. So for these non-Ant-Man movies, my original plan was just to watch the Ant-Man parts because I didn't have time to watch all of these movies. So focusing on the Ant-Man parts here. He shows up and they're like, hey, there's a new recruit. He meets Captain America and reintroduces himself to the Falcon. There's a reference to that fight, which I like a lot. I couldn't remember if they had referenced it in Civil War or not, but they do. I had misattributed a quote to Scott Lang, which was, Captain America needs my help. I thought that was the quote, because obviously he's trying to stay out of jail so that he can rebuild his relationship with his daughter. And I knew there was a moment where, Captain America was like, the line is, we're outside the law on this one. I couldn't remember the line, but, like, I knew there was that interaction. And I thought that Ant-Man's response was, hey, Captain America needs my help. And he doesn't say it in that scene. And so I, like, went back through other parts. I was like, did I miss it? And then I just Googled it, and I was wrong. That is a quote from Sam Wilson. From Captain America: Civil War. No, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. So that's on me. So Ant-Man gets out of the airport. He's there. And then he just does a lot of cool stuff in the scene. And there's a lot of cool stuff that happens in the airport fight scene. I watched the whole thing because it's so cool. This is one of my favorite scenes in movies. So he, among other things, he rides on a Hawkeye arrow. He gets inside Iron Man's suit and pretends to be his conscious. He rides on top of War Machine and then becomes Giant Man. Then as Giant Man, he is able to fight off both Rhodey and Spidey together. The War Machine and Spider-Man together can't stop him. Vision comes in and, like, body slams him and stuff, but, like, Vision doesn't seem like he's really trying all that hard. He's distracted. But then finally it took Rhodey and Spidey and Stark all together, Spidey swinging his legs and Rhodey and Stark hitting him up high to finally take Giant Man down. So, like, I think people, like, you see him as Giant Man and you understand that he's powerful, but I think just Scott Lang's affability and like his silliness, I think keeps us from understanding how powerful he could be. That's just really cool. Couple other notes about Civil War. Like I said, I'm trying to keep this focused on Ant-Man, but there were just a couple other notes that I wrote down. Um, there's a clip where Iron Man is flying up and the Falcon is flying down, and the Falcon shoots a drone onto Iron Man's helmet and like knocks him out of whack, right? And I've seen this a bunch of times, right? Remember that. What I've never noticed before is that in that scene, Iron Man is about to shoot a net at Falcon to tangle him up, and you can see the net and it goes flying off into the air off target because Falcon discombobulated him. I've never noticed that net before. Cool. I missed that Giant Man had T'Challa running scared across the boxes because T'Challa had no way to take him down. And then my only other line here, I'm like, ugh. It's not about Ant-Man, but Peter Parker says, he's like, hey guys, do you remember that really old movie, Empire Strikes Back? And then he's like, remember the part with the walkie thingies? And there's no person on Earth that's going to know enough about Star Wars and the events that happen within them to be able to identify that film particularly as Empire Strikes Back and not just Star Wars or Star Wars Episode 5 or one of the Star Warses, right? He's going to know specifically that that's from Empire Strikes Back, but then not also know that they're called AT-ATs or AT-ATs. And the fact that he's so specific on the one end and so generic on the other end boggles my mind. We're going to move on because that's not about Ant-Man. Then we get to Ant-Man and the Wasp. So obviously this revolves a lot around the fact that Scott came back from the quantum realm. We get introduced to Jimmy Woo. I got a little Jimmy Woo here. I love Jimmy. Jimmy's just such a great character. Where am I at? Okay, why is Hank mad? So this is something that like I wrote down because I couldn't remember, and like it kind of addresses it, but I still don't fully grasp it. Hank and Hope are upset at Scott for fighting with Captain America. And there seems to be multiple layers to this. Hope seems to be at least partially upset that he didn't ask her to go with him. That's not what Hank would be upset about, though, right? So Hank seems to be upset that because Scott got in trouble with the law, that's now making things difficult for him. He thinks that the suit is destroyed, but I think really it's just that Scott seems to be hindering their progress towards finding Janet. But, like, they seem like they're doing fine. And it's like, it's not like he went out on a joyride or something or did something irresponsible. He helped Captain America. Like, seems like a pretty responsible thing to do. So I'm just not quite sure. And, you know, they're all fine by the end, so I guess it does. But it's just like, I couldn't quite grasp why they were both so upset with him in this movie. So then we get... Janet is bringing Scott to their lab, and I wrote down all the links to hide. So all the links they're going through to hide, the tiny cars, the shrinking lab. But they park outside and enlarge outside and then get out and walk to the entrance from the outside where anyone could see them. I'm like, would it be that hard to put in a bay door so that you can drive your car inside the building and shrink and do all your stuff out there? That seems like it would be way, 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 way safer and less conspicuous because people are going to notice the shrinking car, which is then proven exactly true because then I wrote down, how did Ghost find them? Because the car shrinks or grows, I forget which one, but Ghost is just standing right there. And like, that question is never answered of how did she find them? I guess maybe Bill Foster helped because he knows how to track it. Does he have an old suit? Maybe. But, like, that question is never answered explicitly as to how she found them. But, like, also, if you're growing and shrinking your cars outside on the street, I guess it's not that shocking that someone will eventually find you. Then I wrote lecture exposition. I was trying to combine the words lecture, and exposition, lecture position. This happens a lot, and it always annoys me. So it happens here. The people go into a college lecture, and the topic of the lecture happens to be exactly what's happening in the movie. And it's just kind of lazy. Michelle Pfeiffer tells them, not Michelle Pfeiffer, Janet, played by Paul Rudd, tells them that if they miss this window, it's going to be another century before the stuff lines up again. That all went over my head. Maybe it will be explained more in Quantumania. I don't know, but it's like, do we really have to also add in this weird ticking clock, right? We've got this whole thing with the lab shrinking and people trying to steal it and back. Isn't that enough? Do we also need this weird ticking clock? I don't know. And like, it's also 3 days before Scott gets released, and it's like, is that necessary? Does that add to anything? I don't think so. The police would be coming to check on him anyway, so that's all kind of weird. Oh, I skipped right over Bill Foster. I wish we could have seen some Goliath stuff. He tells the story, and like, we get the flashback with Egghead and how Egghead died, which I'm going to get to here in a second. So like, we're doing flashbacks already. We're doing the de-aging with Lawrence Fishburne already. Just show me that blue and gold Goliath suit. I just want to see it. Maybe we'll get it in this one. I don't know. Egghead's death was not Hank's fault. So this is, Bill Foster says that Ava, Ghost, is another victim of Hank Pym's ego or something like that. And then we see this flashback, and like, I'm sorry. Hank might be responsible for, what's his name? I forget his name. Elliot Starr? I'm going to call him Egghead. It seems like he's responsible for him losing his job and being discredited. Fine. Bad move, Hank. Hank claims that he was stealing his work. We're not totally sure if that's true or not, but like, Egghead's a bad guy. He's a villain. So Hank might have something to go on there. But even if that's not true, bad move on Hank. But Egghead is the one that's still continuing to do unsafe experiments with unfounded science, knowing the risks. So, I'm sorry, his death and Ava's condition is not on Hank. It's on Egghead. Okay, magic fingers. Other people have talked about this. It's weird that Janet can just magically heal people with her fingers now, but fine. And then we get the snap. Man, so good. Because I remember seeing this, and I was like, going in, because Infinity War had already come out. So going into the movie, you're like, oh, how are they going to address this? What's going to happen? Blah, blah. And then you kind of forget while you're watching it what happened in Infinity War, because you're caught up in the movie. And then you get to the last scene, and it's like, oh, this was before Infinity War. Now they're all good. And man, it blew my mind. Okay, now we get to Avengers Endgame. And like, again, my plan was only to watch the Ant-Man parts. And like, I skipped a lot. Right? I skipped a lot. But when we got to Thanos coming to Earth, I watched that whole scene again. And like, it's like half an hour long. But it is so good. It's been a while since I watched this. I mean, I've seen this probably 20 times. I saw it a lot in theaters. And I had to like stop myself from just writing down other notes about Endgame because I need to do my own video just on that movie. But I just probably total of the 3-hour movie, I watched less than an hour, but I teared up like at least 5 times. Endgame is so good. And I need to rewatch it fully soon because I kept getting distracted from my Ant-Man stuff here. So we get the rat, and like, I remember a lot of people complained about the rat and how oh, the universe was just saved by the rat, and what are the chances that a rat just blah blah blah. And like, here's the thing, guys, there's a time jump, right? So the fact that it's 5 years later is not particularly important, right? All that's important is that some time has passed. But this story would be pretty much the same whether it was 2 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, 15, 20 years later, the people's ages would, but like, it's just that within the 5 years, yeah, a rat walked across and happened to activate the stuff. It's not, to me, that's not any more unbelievable than anything else that happens in any of these movies. I don't know why people had such a problem with the rat. Kyle Hill, I think, even did a video on it saying that statistically, with how many rats are going through there, it probably would have happened earlier than 5 years. Then we get his um, reuniting with Cassie. And like, I know she's played by a different actress in this movie, in Quantumania. I don't know why. Obviously, she's played by a different actress in Endgame, because there's been 5 years. I don't know why they changed the actress for Quantumania. I should maybe look into that. But I thought that was a very touching scene. And then I just had a note that just... Paul Rudd's emotional acting, his more serious acting, seems to be better to me in Endgame than it was in Ant-Man or Ant-Man and the Wasp. And maybe it's just because of the tone of the movie. Maybe it's because it's a different director. Because I'm sure he's capable of that, right? He had serious stuff in Friends, right? And he's been in a lot of stuff. He did fine in the Halloween movie that he was in. I haven't seen Paul Rudd in a whole lot, but like, pretty sure he was always capable of that. But in the Ant-Man role, I hadn't really seen that really solidly delivered in the first two Ant-Man movies. And there were like some lines and I didn't write them down because I was like, it's just, it's just how he's doing it or whatever. But then in Endgame, I'm like, okay, this is different. So I didn't write down the lines, but there were a couple lines in the first two Ant-Man movies that just seemed like he wasn't quite selling the serious enough. The comedy he did fine, right? The affability he did fine. All that stuff was, but like when it needed to be serious, sometimes it worked and sometimes it was just like, it's just a little bit off. Not enough to like make me hate it, but like enough to notice. But I think he nails it in Endgame. Anytime he needs to be serious, he's serious. Anytime he needs to be funny, he's funny. So like I said, I don't know if that's the direction or what, but I thought it worked way, way better in this. We get the whole, it wasn't 5 years, it was 5 hours thing. Okay, cool. Now we're doing time travel. And then there's just a couple callbacks. We get War Machine calling him regular sized man. I thought that was really, really funny. When they're testing the time travel, not when he turns into a baby, but when all the team is there and they're all testing it, Clint is the one to go back and test it. And like, it makes sense in the story because his family's gone, so he wants to go see his family. But I didn't think about it until this watch, which, like I said, is crazy because I've seen this movie so many times. But like, Clint Barton in the comics was also Goliath for a while, and so like, Hank Pym was off doing something. I don't exactly remember why. I haven't read that whole run. I've read issues from it, but like, there was a while where Clint Barton wasn't Hawkeye; he was Goliath, and he was size changing up and down. So I'm like, I wonder if that's part of the reason that they had Clint go back and test it. But like I said, it also works with the story because of his family, so maybe it's just a coincidence. We get the bit where this isn't all in order, but we get the bit where Scott calls Steve Captain Steve, sorry, America Rogers. It's just, the delivery is just so good. Ant-Man, Scott Lang is the first person. So gosh, my nose itches and I'm trying to not make it look like I'm picking my nose, but it's really itchy. After the Hulk snaps, Clint's the first person to really understand something because his phone's ringing, but he's just 100% focused on his wife. Scott is the one that walks out to the window and sees the trees and the birds, and he's the one that says, I think it worked. And then we get the big portals, everybody coming through on your left. What a great moment. All this stuff going on. And then Doctor Strange is like, is that everybody? And Wong is like, you wanted more? As in, like, what more could there be? And boom, it's Giant Man coming out of the building. Such a cool entrance. And then the fight's going on. And he just takes down a Leviathan in one punch. Later on, he like stomps on... It's not the Black Dwarf, is it? I think he's called Black Dwarf in the comics. Is it Obsidian? The big one. The big part of Thanos' Black Order. He just stomps him down. He doesn't kill him, right? Because that's the guy that then later gets shredded in the force field, I think. I didn't see that part, but I'm pretty sure that's the same one. And then we do get again, this isn't Ant-Man related. I just started writing down other notes. T'Challa, Black Panther, calls Hawkeye Clint when he's running with the thing and he's having trouble, and he's like, Clint, give it to me. And it's just like in Civil War, Hawkeye was like, hey, I'm Clint. He's like, we haven't met. I'm Clint. And Black Panther's like, I don't care. And it's just, there are so many great callbacks in Endgame. And like, I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, Marvel's Phase 4 sucks. Everything's horrible. It's not as good as it used to be. I think it's still very much a work in progress, and we're going to get there. But like, man, Endgame was so good because it had so many callbacks and references. And I think we're missing a lot of that in Phase 4. And we'll see about Phase 5. But like, I don't think you can do that many because we're restarting a new saga. So I'm excited to get there in later movies. Then my last note about, it's also heartbreaking that Natasha's last words to everyone are "see you in a minute," and then she doesn't come back. But my last bit about Ant-Man stuff is when he reunites with the Wasp. And Captain America's like, Scott, you gotta whatever with the van, blah, 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 blah. And what does she say? I already forgot. She says, we're on it, Cap. And again, just a great callback to Ant-Man and the Wasp, because he calls him Cap. And she's like, Cap? You call him Cap? And he's like, yeah, we call him Cap. And it's this fun little argument. And then she goes back and she calls him Cap, and they give each other a look. And it's so good! It's so good. So, I'm very in the Ant-Man zone right now. I'm a little worried going into Quantumania, because I've seen a lot of headlines and video titles and stuff people saying that it's not very good. Normally, I would not put much stock in that, but Love and Thunder was pretty horrible. So that's Love and Thunder has kind of it proves that Marvel movies, I can hate them. I would say there were other MCU movies that I had not liked or even disliked, but Love and Thunder was the first MCU movie that I hated. So it's like, it's possible. But I think most of the Phase 4 stuff I liked pretty well. So I'm not expecting to hate it. But I've seen that stuff out there. I'm hoping that that's going to end up having my expectations lowered, so I will be pleasantly surprised by the film, but I don't know. So I'm cautiously optimistic. Very interested. Oh, I didn't talk about Kang. Very interested in this new version of Kang. So let's briefly talk about He Who Remains, who we get in the last episode of Loki Season 1. He says, I know it all and I've seen it all. I paved the road and you just walked down it. He talks about the multiversal war. So obviously this is going to be a different version of the character. But I hope that there's some common elements between them, right? Because it seems like there should be. He says that he manages the flow of time and prevents any further branches. So I'm very interested to find out whether this new version of Kang was there before in the quantum realm and he was just immune to whatever this version did because he was in the quantum realm and time works differently there, or if it's like a new emergence that's born out of the death of He Who Remains. And then we get the tease, if you think I'm evil, well, if you think I'm evil, well, just wait till you meet my variants. So, they've set a high bar for Kang. They've already titled one of the movies The Kang Dynasty. They're saying that Kang is the new Thanos. So I imagine that if there's disappointment to be had in this movie, in Quantumania, I imagine that it's going to come from the Kang side. Perhaps not living up to the expectations. I'm pretty confident that they're going to do fairly well with Scott and Janet and Hank and Hope. I don't know how much Hank and Hope are in this. I'm excited to see more of Cassie as... Are they calling her Stature? Or is it... Because I know she's got another superhero name that she uses also. But I'm not super familiar with that character, though. So, either way, I'm excited to see the three of them working together. I don't know if this is another Peyton Reed outing or not. But I feel like he did pretty well in the first two. So, hopefully it is. I think, for me... I think the biggest problems that are happening in Phase 4 are directorial problems. I think People have criticized Marvel for being too constrictive on their directors and not letting them do their own thing, but I think that works for the universe as a whole. It might hinder specific films, but I think it works better for the universe as a whole. And I think Taika Waititi is a great example of giving directors too much freedom, because I hated Love and Thunder. I know some people liked it, and good for you, I guess, but I hated it. So I'm hoping if this is a director that's worked with these characters before and has that experience, I hope that's going to carry through. Things like Eternals I didn't love. That was a new director. Shang-Chi I didn't love. That was a new director. So, I'm hoping that because this is kind of a holdover and not a new property or a new character or even a returning director who's just given more free reign, I'm hoping it will fit more inside the box that I like, even if that's not the same box that other people like. What else was I going to say about that? Oh, just a weird thought that entered my brain as I was watching the last episode of Loki is that I feel like we're not getting as many unknown actors in these roles as we used to. Because, no one knew who Tom Hiddleston was. No one knew who Chris Hemsworth was. Very few people knew who Chris Pratt was. Right? And so, I feel like not 100%, because, Simu Liu was pretty unknown for Shang-Chi. But, Eternals, you just get a bunch of big names on the poster. And you expect that to sell the film, and it didn't work. And Love and Thunder, you put Chris Hemsworth and Taika Waititi in the trailers, and, people they know who those are. And that's not really specific to Ant-Man. It's just, maybe they're focusing on the wrong things in this saga, and they need to go back to what we were doing before. I don't know. This trailer had Bill Murray in it, and I have no idea who he is or what he's doing in the movie, but that, I guess, bodes not well if they're just trying to use big faces, big names, a face of a big name to help sell the movie. I don't know. I'm not going to talk myself into a bad mood about it. I'm excited, cautiously optimistic, and I'll let you know what I thought about it afterwards. So, thank you for watching this. Have a good day. Go drink some water. People need to drink more water. Go drink some water.